Welcome. Sorry for the delay.
No worries.
And thank you for taking time with us this afternoon. For those who are watching Spliced Up Videos, my name is Jonathan Cohn. I'm the Policy Director with Progressive Mass. What we'll do is I'll be asking a few questions at the start, then I'll be tagging in other folks who will ask a few questions, and then I'll close us out afterwards. To kick us off, uh, the typical thing that I'm sure you're used to on the campaign cycle. Tell us, like, take a minute or two, tell us who you are, why you're running, and all of that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm zooming in from my car because we're inland getting ready to go to the immigrants rally that's coming up soon. And I'm State Representative Tram Nguyen. I think some of you have helped me to get elected in 2018 when I beat Jim Lyons, the MAGA Republican. And I've been in office ever since as part of the Progressive Caucus and have worked closely with you all. I appreciate all the support you've given me through the years and hope to earn your support for this race. For those who are not familiar with me, my story didn't begin here in the US. It began under an authoritarian regime in Vietnam. I came over to the US as a political refugee with my family when I was 5 years old, with literally $100 to our name. We went straight here to Massachusetts, to Lawrence, where I lived in public housing. I'm not unfamiliar with standing in the food pantry line, seeing how much my parents struggled to pay rent, which is why all the issues that we talk about in terms of economic justice and equity, these are very personal to me because I saw how my dad had to deliver pizza and Chinese food, not knowing a word of English, not understanding his rights, which is why I've dedicated my entire career to public service. So after being the first in my family to graduate from college and then law school, rather than going to a big law firm, I decided to be an Equal Justice Works Fellow at Greater Boston Legal Services, where I help survivors of domestic violence, low-wage workers, immigrants, essentially those who are the most marginalized, trying to make sure that we give them representation, but also advocacy. So that was how I got started. I'm a union member. I became a UAW Local 2320 member since my days at Greater Boston Legal Services and worked with Greater Boston, with at the AFL-CIO, as well as some of you, and the Raise Up Coalition to raise the minimum wage, getting paid family medical leave here in Massachusetts. So these are not fights that I'm unfamiliar with, right? And I often call myself an accidental politician because I've never sought out to run for elected office. It was truly my such a pleasure for me to be a litigator and working at GBLS. But then in 2017, when I saw that my rep filed a bill that would have allowed police officers to stop anyone who looks illegal, I was outraged. And that was what prompted me to then consider running for office. I did run a race that many people said I had no business in because it's a 96% white community. They have never had a person of color represent them. People could barely pronounce my name. I had to teach people how to do that. Trom rhymes with mom, win like winning. You're going to win with win. And we beat the MAGA Republican by 10 points and really just shocked the political establishment. And that's what we're looking to do in this race. I'm running because I want to represent people, everyday people, not special interests. And I think that that's especially important given this moment in time when our government's in crisis, when we have DC insiders and people who are very well resourced, multimillionaires looking to buy seats rather than really serving the people. As I said, I'm sitting here in Lynn. I'm just so excited. I just met with a Haitian community member, leader, who just put up my sign in front of her store because that's how we're building out the electorate, meeting people where they're at, helping people who have felt disengaged from government to make them feel like government can be a source of good. And I've seen what's possible when government actually delivers. And I'm proud of the work that we've been able to do at the state level in some parts, but there's so much more to be done. And we cannot do it alone without federal support. And as the strongest progressive in this race, I'm very excited to have this conversation with you all and to see how we can partner with you to push progressive values and make sure that we're representing everyday people and making sure that we send a clear message that public servants, champions of the people will beat DC insiders and multimillionaires every time if we organize.
Awesome, and that's a great segue into the next question. Do you consider yourself progressive? And if so, how do you define the word progressive?
No, that's a great question. And yes, I have been a part of the Progressive Caucus ever since I came into the legislature. And that's for a very specific reason, is that I believe in equity. I think that when you uplift the most vulnerable and when you work to find, push forward our shared values and our shared vision of an equitable, welcoming and inclusive world for all. That is something that we could bring other people along. And to me, being a progressive, that means being bold in what we can envision for the future and also bringing people in. Building out that tent and trying to make sure that when we are moving forward, that we are not leaving particularly communities of color and immigrant communities behind. And that's why I've been so committed as the only immigrant in this race, as the only one who can say that I came from a working class family and has dedicated my entire career to uplifting the most vulnerable among us. I think that that's exactly the progressive values that I bring to the table and to bring to Congress. That's very different. A fresh voice, new perspective that is very needed in this time when, special interests are pouring their money into different candidates. And there are people here in this, whether this race or elsewhere, who seem to care more about the title than shared leadership, which is what I've been able to do my entire career in terms of making sure we're working with organizations, we're working with community leaders, community organizations, and all different levels of government so that we can be the most responsive and helpful to people.
Awesome. And some of the points that you have already noted segues well into the next question is, so do you support the goal of abolishing ICE? And if so, what does that mean to you in practice?
I love this question. As an immigrant, especially as an immigration lawyer, I've been thinking about this for a very, very long time. I'm sure you all follow me on social media. You've seen that right from the get-go. I've come out very strongly for this. And in fact, I'm very excited that we're going to be voting on the Protect Act this Wednesday at the State House as well. And I've been leading on that along with my colleagues in the Black and Latino caucus. I'm also the vice chair of the House Asian caucus, and we've been partnering with them on that. But of course, we do. This is a rogue agency. There's no reason for us to throw in another $75 billion for this agency that seems to have complete disregard for our rule of law, for human rights and human dignity, and especially as an immigration lawyer and someone who's benefited from, the refugee. As a refugee, I care deeply about this. I worked on the UN. I worked on refugee and asylee cases, UNT visa cases. All of these options have now come to a halt because we don't have enough judges. We don't have enough administrators to even go through the visa process. And in fact, we're losing billions of dollars in talent too. So I've also done work with the Extraordinary Abilities Visa, the EB-1s. We used to approve 90 something percent of them, and now we're approving them at a 40% rate. That means that all of this talent from overseas are not coming into the US. So it's not only an attack on immigrants, it's also an attack on our institutions, our education institutions, and all the universities here. And so for me, I'm envisioning a system that actually works, that would give people a pathway to citizenship, to protect dreamers and actually give them the option of, if you are a good person, you're working hard and you are here. And right now, they're not getting the benefits of the taxes that they paid into the system. Why are we not utilizing that? I mean, it has worked before. It has worked in other countries. We're not talking about completely dismantling the vetting process, but the vetting process should not be non-existent. And that's the reality for so many people now. They're undocumented because there's actually no pathway for them to become citizens or to be to have the documents that they need to work and not live in fear. And for me, this is going to be safety for everyone, especially now when I'm seeing the fear in our communities. It's not just the immigrants who are feeling fearful. It's also permeating throughout our lives. I have so many people coming up to me, U.S. citizens, asking, "Oh, I'm Asian, I'm Latinx, I am Black. Should I carry my passport?" You're a citizen. Why are you afraid of this? But they are afraid. And can you blame them for being afraid? That is not an America where everyone's treated fairly under the law. And that's what I'm committed to doing, is to fix this broken immigration system. And I think that especially as an immigrant and an immigration lawyer, I will add a very critical voice to this fight to actually come up with real solutions.
Oh, I was muted. Awesome. So, over the past few decades, we've seen increasing concentration of corporate power and consolidation in the US, as well as growing economic inequality. What would be your top priorities that you'd advocate for if elected to rein in corporate power and reduce economic inequality in the US?
Some of the things that we're already doing here in Massachusetts, we should definitely be implementing federally. Like we talked about, actually, I didn't mention this. I worked on the millionaires tax even before I was able to vote on that, which was great. That the Fair Share Amendment, we just voted on it this past week on how to distribute the money out to transportation and education. Right, like that is the sort of taxation that we should be thinking about at the federal level. If you're a multimillionaire, you should be paying more of your fair share of taxes. We need to be taxing excessive CEO pay. We should be like the extremely wealthy should, and corporations should be paying more than regular people. When I'm seeing a corporation paying $400 in taxes, it makes me outraged. I'm outraged by it because I'm paying a lot more than that. I'm sure many of you are too. But I think that that's why the big ugly bill is so disgusting. Is that it's giving such huge corporate tax breaks, and we need to close these loopholes. Especially as the member of the Progressive Caucus here, we've also worked on GILTI and how to make sure that we limit the amount of money that's being poured in offshore accounts and businesses and keep more of that money in our Commonwealth so that we can use that for good, like transportation, education, and increasing just our basic rights and access to things that people need every single day. So those are the priorities that I'm going to focus on. And also just why are people who are making investments paying less in taxes than people who are actually putting their sweat into their work? And so these are things that I think have been benefiting the rich for far too long. And we need to think about how we can support working families.
Awesome. And then, in terms of things that have been getting worse over time, the climate crisis. So, what would be your top priorities for addressing the climate crisis and transitioning the US away from fossil fuels?
Well, thank you again for that question. For those who don't know, I currently chair the House Committee on Climate Action and Sustainability, and this has been the work that I've done for a very, very long time. We have to make investments in clean energy. We need to just get the barriers to offshore wind right now is just horrendous, and the uncertainty that we are signaling to companies is making them not want to invest, and that is not okay. I recently just met with the Consul General of Canada, and what does that mean for us to not be able to work with them to get hydroelectric power here? So there are options, but the US needs to make these investments, and they need to not even make the investments, just not be a barrier to some of the great work that we've been able to do. And I think that's the reality of what we're dealing with right now is that not only do we not have a partner, but we actually have like obstacles that we have to pass through. So we need climate champions there, but also investments in coastal resilience. This district has Gloucester and Ipswich and all of these places. We're dealing with storm surges. We're dealing with erosion and all of these issues. Climate change is affecting all of us in so many different ways, especially in a state like Massachusetts, where we're right here by the water. And so what types of investments can we be putting in for infrastructure, water treatment? All of these things will make lives easier for people. And the infrastructure investments need to be coming from the federal government and not taxed to the people. That's why so many people in Gloucester have been talking about, like, why are we paying for this water treatment plant when this is something that the federal government has neglected for a very, very long time? And so that's why as the only sitting legislator in this race, as the only one who's had experience of working on legislation, passing legislation, bringing money back to the district, and also constituent services. I came in right before the COVID pandemic. I also, if you all remember, the Columbia gas explosion was my district. That's Andover, North Andover, and part of Lawrence. So all of these issues are very personal to me. That's why I know intimately that we have to transition away from fossil fuel because that was what caused the explosion in my district. I have to lead my district through that. And then COVID happened, and of course, the whole world shut down. And now we have to think through too of what does that mean for us to be able to make these investments in a way that also bring people along, and that includes working on vocational schools and working with unions so that they can train their people for these green jobs going forward.
Awesome. And I'm going to tag in Max to ask the next question.
Hello. So in light of like discriminatory anti-trans legislation on both the state level and on the federal level, I want to know if you will fight for transgender people, especially trans youth, speaking from experience, are the most vulnerable in Congress, and if so, how would you do it?
Thank you so much for the question, Max. I have been doing this work my entire career. When I was at Greater Boston Legal Services, some of the people I represented are LGBTQ youth. And making sure that they have the protections that they need. And in fact, one of the reasons why I also ran in 2018 was that was a year of question three, where Jim Lyons and those people wanted to ban transgender people from using public facilities. I'm completely outraged by that. I've been an ally and a supporter, an advocate and champion with LGBTQ people and trans people. And I want to make sure that, especially for young folks, that you know that you have someone who will stand with you and make sure that we are protecting your civil rights and your human rights. So you can live with dignity. I think that that's at the end of the day. Uh, it's not any specific legislation. It's more or less of just pushing forward to make sure that you have access to everything that anyone else would have. And this is exactly why, for me, this work has always been about fighting for the most vulnerable. And I think trans youth is especially the most vulnerable, and which is why we fought for gender affirming care. I was a champion of that. We want to make that federal. We have passed the SHIELD Act, which would protect people coming here to Massachusetts to get the care that they need. But that is the sort of investments that we need to do and make sure that they're paid for by insurance, because that is healthcare and mental health and making sure you have resources to all that you need in order for you to thrive. And so all of these things that I've been able to champion at the state level, I'm looking to do, and much more so at the federal level.
Awesome. I'm going to tag in Zeba, and then I'll ask the closing question after Zeba.
Hi, Tram. I'm going to cover foreign policy. Many Democrats have opposed the war in Iran primarily on the grounds of lacking congressional authorization, but still supporting measures like resolutions being labeling Iran as the world's biggest exporter of terror, positions that could be used to support or justify military action. So, after decades of sanction and rising tensions, do you support or oppose U.S. military action in Iran under any circumstances? Beyond war powers, what is your policy or affirmative perspective on continued sanctions, diplomacy, or regime change in Iran?
So I just want to be clear that I come from a war-torn country, so I understand how much war can be so traumatizing to many people. And we've seen the bravery of the people in Iran who've been standing up against the regime, and they have my full sympathy. But the whole waking up to Trump ordering a military strike on Iran without any congressional oversight is just horrendous to me. And the War Powers Resolution should not have been invoked in this case because A, we're not at war yet, and also there has to be uh, a threat to the US, which at this point there isn't any. So I think that the whole violation of our Constitution, our complete disregard of our rule of law is very problematic with this regime. But overall, given the cost to service members and also the costliness of what this could look like. We do not want another 20 years of Afghanistan. All that money that would be going to this work should be used for the things that we need every day. We're talking about investments in people here. And right now, we are not making the investments in housing, healthcare, childcare, utilities, or anything on the ground. And so for me, I think it's very problematic that we're putting all this money into a war that seems never ending.
And what about sanctions? Would you support continued sanctions on Iran after 46 years?
Um, I'm going to be very, very honest. I have not looked into that issue of the sanctions, and so I'm going to have to see what the parameters of that is. But I'd be happy to look into that a little bit more. And I'm just going to be very clear that I have just not been able.
I'll
I have
share
not looked into.
for you that you
That
might
would
want.
be great.
The next question is on Israel and funding for weapons to Israel. Many scholars have argued that Israel's actions in Gaza constitute genocide. I'm interested in hearing, do you believe Israel's actions in the West Bank meet the legal definition of genocide? And would you support ending any military assistance to Israel, both offensive and defensive weapons to Israel?
Yeah, so I think that what Israel's been doing to Gaza is just outrageous. The loss of life is just heartbreaking in so many ways. And the legal definition of genocide is for the international court to decide. But for me, I think that this is reaching that level where we have to put a complete stop to Netanyahu and his regime. There's no way that the U.S. should give a blank check to this regime that seems to care more about killing killing and actually just trying to gain power in so many different ways that is just horrifying. And as I mentioned, as someone who's come from a war-torn country, I just find it devastating, and I think the trauma is going to continue for decades to come. But this whole, oh, we have to, they're allies, like we have to keep our allies accountable too. That's not something that the U.S. should be supporting at this moment in time when they are committing tremendously horrible acts.
So just to be clear, you would call this a genocide?
So I would call this a genocide if the criminal court, because for me, as a lawyer, I care deeply about the actual definition of genocide. So I'm not the one to make that determination, but I'm saying, yes, it is reaching that level, and I'm not the one to make that determination. The criminal international court would make that legal definition of genocide. But yes, I would call this as
In
close to
your
genocide as
legal
possible.
view, or in your personal view, or emotional view,
Yeah.
or moral view?
Yes,
Okay.
my emotional, yes. So I'm differentiating my emotional view versus the legal definition. Yes, I personally.
And then would you vote to end both offensive and defensive weapons to Israel?
Yes, as of right now, we should not be giving a blank check to them at this point. Absolutely.
Thank you. That's all I've got.
Okay. And final question. So we're like, as we're in the midst of our own endorsement process, how do you make decisions on when to endorse and whom to endorse in races yourself?
Oh, for me, I guess it depends on the type of races, right? I mean,
Yeah, so this could be like for any race. We're just curious to hear like what are people's own endorsement philosophies?
Yeah, so my endorsement philosophy is number one, if someone's aligned on values, and whether someone has a track record of getting things done, whether someone has actually made an effort to like work with different people. I think that the experience as being a legislator, I care deeply about relationships at local level, the state level, and the federal level, but also with community. I think someone who believe in shared leadership are people that I look for, because when you're only reaching out to those who are super voters or common voters, then you're missing a whole swath of people who otherwise have felt so disengaged and disillusioned by government. And I think we need to win back those people if we want to keep our democracy. And so for me, I look for people who share those priorities. And I hope you all will do the same, because it does seem like our values are aligned. I mean, I tell people all the time, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm going to agree with you 100% of the time. But what I can promise you is that if you call, I will 100% listen and actually explain to you why my votes are the way that they are. Because I think accountability is so key. And I think having conversations is so key. And those are the types of people I look to endorse, who are willing to listen and even agree to disagree at times, but to actually have a backbone to stand up for whatever you believe in and to keep people accountable, whether that's Republicans or Democrats. When I woke up and I saw like 4 Democrats decide to vote with the Republicans to not, to shut down the resolution that would force Trump to actually go to Congress to get, to get authority to continue any more actions on Iran, that is not acceptable to me. So that's why we want to find people who are willing to take the tough fights and take on tough fights and actually be able to push forward and find ways to move legislation forward and actually get real results for people. People are suffering right now. Accountability, affordability, all those things are top of mind. And I tell people this all the time. If we can't help people put food on the table, it's going to be very hard for them to care about voting rights or democracy of any kind. And that's why economic justice has always been in the forefront of all the work that I do, so that everyone has the opportunity to thrive, so then they can worry more about some of these other things like activism and civics and all the things that we care about to try to get people to the polls.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know you have the amazing rally to get to, but can we get a round of Zoom applause for Tram?
Thank you so much, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much.